4, 3, 2, 1. Blog Talk Radio.
Constitutionalists, and welcome to the Wednesday edition of the Dan Clemens Show, a Christian political talk show. This is episode 791. I'm your host, Dan Clemens, your constitutional warrior, fighting for your right just to be an American. It is May 3rd in the year of our Lord 2017. Remember, we're hyphen-free, PC-free zone. God is still in control, and He does love you. And I'm broadcasting live from the Hemlock Studios here in the beautiful central Susquehanna Valley in the great Keystone State. After yesterday, I'm, again, not going to be taking phone calls for a while because of trolls that get on there and think it's funny to call into a live radio show and act up that way. That's why I guess most radio shows have call screeners. That is going to be a call screener producer type thing is going to be the number one priority for the show. I have been working on a Patreon page for the website for danclemenshow.com, working on a couple other things for that, Convention of the States web or page for that because of my support for that. And you know, just trying to boost things around here. I got a good report from YouTube. My monthly report looked really good for the amount of subscriptions I have. My view time is way up. And folks, that's in YouTube nowadays, instead of clicks per million you get paid for, which everybody's complaining about, they changed their model and they're paying for the amount of time videos are viewed. And I think that's going to stop a lot of the clickbait. And I've always been critical of people who put clickbait descriptions up on their blogs, their articles, or up on YouTube videos just to get somebody to click on it. And you watch the video, and it's like, well, when are they going to talk about what they talked about in the actual title of the video? So I was always like, it always made me mad because I wasted my time. But it didn't waste their time because they're making money off of that. And I haven't really noticed because some of the channels that were really clickbaiting, I just unsubscribed from. You know, I'm like, you're not even going to come on my channel, you know, up on my channel on YouTube as a recommendation for viewing or whatever, because that just, like I said, folks, that ticks me off to no end. It really, really does. So I just wanted to point that out, that yesterday we had a couple trolls come on the channel, and on the radio, on the Blog Talk Radio side, calling in, which I can take phone calls there, and I cold call them, and it just, like I said, it irks me to no end that people come on and do stuff like that. Now, today I'm going to talk about tyranny and federal spending. We have some articles I want to talk about on the tyranny side, and the reason why I put federal spending along with that is because anything that's above and beyond the enumerated powers in the Constitution, the federal government does, and they confiscate taxes from the citizens of the United States, the tax-paying citizens of the United States, to pay for these unconstitutional things, that's a tyranny. They're taking something from you, forcing you through your tax dollars to support something that isn't even constitutional. And that is a type of tyranny. And this, if you haven't been watching the news the past couple days, the Republicans have really fumbled the ball when it comes to this spending bill that's supposed to take us through the end of fiscal year this year, September 30th. They have something in there called forward funding, and I got a video from cnsnews.com I want to share with you on this. The Corporation for Public Broadcasting will be funded through the end of fiscal year 2019 in this spending resolution. I am convinced that the Republicans do not know how to govern when they're in charge. I'm convinced of that. And they've been showing me every day. And not that I'm a supporter of the Republicans. I'm not. I'm a member of the Constitution Party. I didn't even vote for the Republicans as far as the leadership. Now, I voted for Lou Barletta. He's a Republican. But Lou Barletta doesn't, I got to check today, see where he stands on this. But in the past, he wants to defund these things. And hopefully somebody votes against this stuff. Just like the Ryan Care. You know, they're trying to amend Ryan Care instead of just dealing with Obamacare and repealing it outright, and then just do some laws, some regulations through Congress on, and you could use the Commerce Clause on this one. Get rid of the portability laws where people can buy across state lines. Get competition. Get nationwide competition in the health insurance side of everything. Okay? Get it in there. Then these pre-existing condition things that they're talking about will go away. They will disappear because guess what? The insurance companies are in business to make money. There's no other reason to be in business except to make money. All right? I mean, you can serve people through service industries. Your product can serve people, can save lives in that. But if your company is not making money, you might as well move back over. You might as well go over to Soviet Russia in the past and let the state run the whole thing. And honestly, folks, that's where you need to go if you have that type of mentality. We've never had in my lifetime the nationwide competition that we need in health insurance. We've had it in our auto insurance. I have it in my house insurance. Two big things, you know, and today cars are not a small investment. Just like my health is not a small investment, just like my house is not a small investment. I mean, every now and then we'll see a house for sale out there and we're kind of curious what it is. So we get on realtor.com. It's not a ad for realtor.com, but we get on there and look at the prices, and we're just, you know, we're holding our hearts. Oh, you know, around here, a good home, a good 2-bedroom, 3-bedroom, 2-bath home, ranch house, or whatever is going to cost you in excess of $150,000, closer to $200,000. That's the reality of today. And so that's a big investment too. So why? If I can shop across state line for auto insurance, if I can, you know, on a brand new vehicle, we're talking anywhere from the low end, 15,000, to high end for a guy like me, you know, that would be reasonable, would be around, you know, 40,000. I want to protect that with insurance, but I can buy insurance policies all over the country for that. The same way with my house. Why can't I do the same thing with my insurance? Because of the Commerce Clause and the portability law. States have stopped commerce between states when it comes to health insurance. And to me, this is a no-brainer, folks. This is a constitutional no-brainer. That's exactly what the Commerce Clause was put into the Constitution for, to stop states from doing this. As a sovereign citizen, I have the right. I have the constitutional right to buy my health insurance across state lines. States should not be allowed to enact laws that stops me from doing this. It just shouldn't. And you take that out of the way and you let the healthcare markets even out. That'll take care of the pre-existing conditions, because people, that's still insurance dollars that they can make, or insurance policies that people can make money off of. And through competition, it'll keep the prices down. Matter of fact, through competition, it may come up where an insurance company says, well, we're just not going to worry about pre-existing conditions. But you still have to have an insurance policy enacted within, and be on it for 6 months before we'll pay for pre-existing conditions. But we'll let you come on, won't cost you any more, but it'll be 6 months. That's an inducement by the insurance companies. And competition might do that. And who knows where competition will lead? We don't know. But we know where government-controlled healthcare leads. It leads us down the path of ruin and destruction and tyranny, because they had to force people onto the insurance. I get in discussions every day about this on Twitter or on Facebook. The anti-freedom folks out there don't have a clue when it comes to economics. Don't have a clue when you force people to do things. I didn't want to be on Obamacare. Where my wife works, they went through the Obamacare exchanges here in Pennsylvania, and that's the insurance policies they offered their employees. As far as I'm concerned, the people that made that decision for the people she works for were anti-freedom folks. It saved them a lot of money, but when you have a family policy where we were going to be going, if we stayed on that, we were going to be upwards of $12,000 for a family policy for deductibles before they pay prescriptions or anything. $12,000 out of our pockets. I'm sorry, folks, I don't have $12,000 laying around. Now I do have a certain amount of money in my retirement plan, but I shouldn't have to dip into that to pay for medical bills, especially $12,000 in a year's time. I'm not saying we do that. Neither one of us incur that much in a year's time, but still, that's all out of pocket. And so this spending, the Republicans, I'm sorry, I made, Sarah Marie, I made a friend with her. I interviewed her. She's a staunch Trump supporter. And I want to give the Republicans the benefit of the doubt, but there's no doubt in my mind that they're a bunch of morons up there. They have literally lost their minds, especially the leadership. Where did they forget all the campaign promises? And honestly, folks, this is what makes me the maddest the most. That may not be the grammatically way to say this, but it makes me maddest the most that these Republicans out there are doing this, and then the voters don't remember the next time we go to vote. 2018, we have midterm elections coming up. And I'll bet you $1 to the dozen donuts that Republicans will not hold it against their elected representatives that they went against their campaign promises, because the alternative in their minds, electing a Democrat, is worse than their politician not fulfilling the promises on the campaign trail. And I include Donald Trump with this too. And I'm still trying to get the context of some of them comments that Donald Trump stated about, being president and governing is harder than I thought it was going to be. And I don't think that was a stupid statement. I think he thought that all these campaign and this, I'm not putting words in his mouth. I'm just, my idea of this is a lot of these Republicans that are in Congress, the Senate and the House, made some of the similar campaign promises that President Trump did, and he thought this was going to be a slam dunk to get these things through, and it turns out it's not. It absolutely turns out it's not a slam dunk to get these things through. So yes, it is harder, and I think the left's the anti-freedom crowd is a little more critical of President Trump than they need to be. Now, talking about tyranny. This is the first time I've did this in a long time, and I felt good after I was done. I read, it was a 128-page book by a historian, Timothy Snyder, and pretty much, let me get down here. He wrote a book about tyranny. Let me get. He's a history professor at Yale University, which doesn't bode well for him to begin with. And he wrote a book about tyranny and the overthrow of democracy in America. So it's only 128 pages. I have a Kindle reader, so I got that and I thought, I might struggle to get through this. Well, it was like 20 chapters, and I didn't struggle to get through it at all. It was a good read. I read right through it, but when I say good read, I'm not saying that Mr. Snyder, professor or doctor, whatever you want to call him, Snyder, was accurate. This book, historically, was so slanted towards the anti-freedom folks in this country that, in my opinion, that book is, I'm going to be blunt with it, is a piece of garbage. Because the things in his book, although a lot of the history he was actually citing was historically accurate, he portrayed Donald Trump in such a way that he was going to violate all this. And basically what Tim Snyder, this professor, this historian Timothy Snyder, is talking about is pretty much inevitable that Trump will try to stage a coup and overthrow democracy. Now, that's his thoughts. And like I said, I read through the book. What a bunch of historical tripe. And like I said, a lot of the facts were accurate, but the way he portrayed them in the book was very slanted towards anti-freedom, slanted towards fascism, socialism, and communism, would not critique President Obama or George Bush or President Clinton in history before, complaining in the book about too many people think history started in 1979. And my problem is too many people don't even go back, that they say that talk about history started in 1979, don't go back much further than 1900. And don't talk about history that's pre-1900. And compares Donald Trump in this book to all these totalitarian dictators and says, this is how we got here to here. Now, Timothy Snyder's still working on a left-right paradigm. And this is, and even the author of this article, Chauncey DeVega, and this is over at salon.com, he has a podcast. I listen to his podcast. Here is another man. He has a podcast on Salon. I don't know how big the audience is. Really don't care. Everything he talks about with Trump, as far as the Russians and the emoluments clause, all those type of things, he is factually incorrect about and constitutionally incorrect about. As far as I know, there hasn't been a conclusion to any of the investigation with the Russian hacking of the elections. Matter of fact, I left a comment about that. And I left a comment after I read the book and said, if you're basing your ideology on this book, you're totally off base. You're so far out in the anti-freedom left field that we can't even see you. And so I'm not going to particularly critique the book, which I've already have. It is a biased political hack job. From a man that's supposed to be a historian. And the last time I checked, I thought historians and people look at history are supposed to not be biased about it and actually look at history and draw proper conclusions, historical conclusions from history. This Timothy Snyder does not. He's totally in the fascist, and he describes fascism wrong. He describes socialism wrong, and he describes communism wrong. And that's why we're going to talk about tyranny today. And he doesn't even, this book is a fairly recent book that was put out, and because he talks about this past election. And he doesn't even talk about the Antifa movement. He doesn't talk about the Black Lives Matter movement. He doesn't talk about George Soros, who's behind all these groups, Common Cause, Let America Vote, I'm not sure if he's behind Indivisible, although Robert Reich has had a relationship with George Soros over the years. So, if we dig deep enough, we'll probably find some funding from George Soros in the Indivisible group. But what's amazing to me is these anti-freedom folks want to revise history. They absolutely want to revise history so their side looks good and the opponents look bad. And in doing so, they're doing a disservice to history, and they're doing a disservice to the people they're supposed to be informing. And so that's why that's one of the reasons why I read that book. It was only 128 pages, and honestly, folks, I'm not the fastest reader in the world, but I had that done in less than 2 hours. It was, like I said, it was an interesting read. I sat down there, and I probably read a little bit longer than I should have because I was getting tired, but I muscled through it. And it's amazing to me how the anti-freedom groups out there and folks who write for the anti-freedom media out there actually thinks and wants other people to think this way. And then I'm called on the carpet by these guys because this guy's a doctor. How dare I? How dare I critique his work? How dare I put down his work as historical garbage as far as his explaining the narrative and only applying it to Donald Trump? And if you read through the book and you got an open mind and you think about, Bill Clinton and George W. Bush and Barack Obama, he's left a whole swath of history out that he could apply what he was talking about in history, what happened with the Bolshevik Revolution, what happened with Europe when Hitler took over Europe, and all these things that were adding up, or actually piecing together in world history. But the only person he compared it to was Donald Trump, which is unfair to begin with, historically inaccurate, because, like I said, he's still working on a left-right paradigm. A lot of folks in the anti-freedom movement look at Hitler and Nazis as being a conservative right-wing manifestation. And folks, that just is not so. That's not so. Matter of fact, if you go back and look at that, if you want to stay on the left-right paradigm, the rise of Hitler and everything that came about with the brown shirts and politics, he talked about policy and he talked about words mean thing and stuff like this. If you want to use words and phrases and stuff like that, everything he was talking about there literally and figuratively accurately describes the anti-freedom groups that I'm fighting on this program almost every day and talking about, bringing them to you. It describes them. And if you want to, if you're on a left-right paradigm, this would be, on the left side of that paradigm. And I don't like invoking the figure of Hitler when you're talking about an American political figure. I just want to get that out here right now. I think you are small-minded when you do that, and I don't want to personally attack anybody. I think you're small-minded when you do that. I think you're historically inaccurate when you do that also, especially in these modern times. I in my heart of hearts, I think it's a gross misrepresentation to say that Donald Trump is Hitler, or he's acting like Hitler, or his policies are Hitlerian. Anybody says that is hilarious, in the extreme, because they really don't know what they're talking about. And those are just the facts. I have some articles in here. We're going to talk about remembering Japanese American internment really matters this year. I want you to read this article, folks, or I'm going to read it to you. Mother Jones. 200 refugees are crossing Mexico to escape violence and to confront Trump. Again, another article from Mother Jones. And it amazes me, folks, how much the anti-freedom group gets wrong out there and how literally exhausting it is trying to do research to prove them wrong and to try to set the narrative straight from a constitutional standpoint as like an outsider, which I am. I'm not a Republican. I'm a member of the Constitution Party, and thank God that I am. Because like I said, these Republicans, as I started out in my monologue here, these Republicans are losing their minds. They're out of their minds. And they don't even remember their campaign promises. And the people, if they would just if they would just follow through on their campaign promises. The people that voted them into office are of enough of a number that they would have political cover through the people that actually elected them. And they wouldn't have to worry about the Democrats, to be quite honest with you. But they're so worried, and this is something that just boggles my mind. The Republicans in Congress are so worried about the Democrats, which they outnumber in the House and the Senate, in governorships throughout the states and in legislatures throughout the states. There hasn't been a time in history where Republicans have had this much control over policy, laws, legislatures. And what are they doing with it? They're on the 1 yard line getting ready to go in for a touchdown to keep fumbling the ball. They keep fumbling the ball. And I tell you what, it's not going to bode well for them in 2018 because the forgotten men and women aren't going to forget what they're doing. They're not going to forget what they're doing. And honestly, I think 2018 might be the year of the newcomers. And actually, if the Republicans fail to do this and the Democrats continue to be the roadblock, I think you're going to see a lot of incumbents go by the wayside in 2018. I really do. And that's one of the reasons why, too, that I'm supporting the Convention of the States, because one of the things the Convention of the States wants to do is term limit these clowns in Congress to 12 years. Some of these guys, and a vast majority, percentage-wise, of Congress has been in there well over 20 years. Some of them well over 30 years. A lot of them over 30 years. Term limit them. Get them out of there. Take away the power of incumbency. Get that out of there. Get some fresh ideas up there and actually get some people up there that might stand on principle and keep their campaign promises. I don't think it's that hard. I really don't think it's that hard to keep your campaign promises. Folks, today's show is being brought to you by Bluehost.com. If you go to thedanclemenshow.com, and at the top of the page, you'll see a Bluehost widget up there, and they're an affiliate marketer of mine. You go on there if you want to start a web page, and it almost seems like everybody has a web page nowadays. They're a WordPress friendly hosting service. Plug and play a lot of things. Some things cost you. Most things are free. And they do a fantastic job of the hosting of it. You can create your website for however you want it to look. Whether it's a blog, whether you got something to sell, whether you're writing a book and want it to be a landing page, or you want to just start your own news site because you're tired of all the news out there that's being put on everybody that's not being vetted. Whatever you want to do, folks, the internet's still pretty much like the Wild West. It's free and open. And you can for a few dollars a month, $3.95 a month, can start a website and get yourself heard out there in the wonderful world of the internet. Today's daily Bible reading comes from the Gospel of Mark, chapter 1, verses 16 through 20. And he, Jesus Christ, and he walked by the Sea of Galilee. He saw Simon and Andrew, his brother, casting a net into the sea, for they were fishermen. And Jesus said unto them, Follow me, and I'll make you become fishers of men. They immediately left their nets and followed him. And when he had gone a little further from there, he saw James, the son of Zebedee, and John his brother, who also were in a boat mending their nets. And immediately he called them, and they left their father Zebedee in the boat with the hired servants and went after him. This is the calling of the first apostles. Simon, who later become Peter, Andrew his brother, and James and John, the sons of Zebedee, the first apostles that were called by Jesus Christ in the Gospel of Mark. Quote meal today is by Lewis B. Smedes. Over the long run, love's power to forgive is stronger than hate's power to get even. Remember that, folks. Remember that. At today's short Bible lesson, Defining the Different Ages by Mike Riley over gewatkins.net. You got the patriarchal age, you got the Mosaic age, and then you got the Christian dispensation. And he goes through a small bulletin article actually talking about that and does a really good job explaining this terminology that Christian Jews, or at least the students of the Bible, should be using when talking about the different ages. All right. Little lemonade here, folks. I had to run my daughter into the Y to meet with her friend Charmaine, who helps out and works out with the Y with her and takes her out places and has a swim pool at home, and when it's warm enough takes her swimming and that. So I dropped her off, and Lori was getting off work about the same time. And I said, honey, you want to go over to Dunkin' Donuts? And she goes, howdy. So I had a cup of coffee over there, so I'm about coffeeed out today. That's why I'm drinking lemonade, but I had a good time, about a half an hour or so, sitting there chit-chatting with my wife and my best friend in the world. So I like doing that every now and then. And we couldn't remember the last time we did that. we couldn't. We need to do that more often. All right. Let's get into some articles here because there are a couple page articles and I want to read them because they make some, I think they make some erroneous assertions in these articles. And this one, why remembering Japanese American internment really matters this year. And this is by Matt Tinico over at Mother Jones, and he posted this on the 1st of May. As a long line of cars, trucks, and more than 24 charter buses pulled into dusty makeshift parking lots in the high desert below California's snow-capped eastern Sierra Nevada mountains on Saturday morning, they were greeted by a National Park Service ranger. Welcome to Manzanar, she said. It is very dry. Drink a lot of water. They descended on the remote Owens Valley, 4 hours north of Los Angeles, to commemorate the 75th anniversary of Executive Order 9066, President Franklin Delano Roosevelt's February 1942 decision to forcibly detain 120,000 Japanese Americans until the end of World War II. Manzanar War Relocation Center, as the facility was formerly called, was one of 10 internment camps nationwide. At its peak, the 5,415-acre site held more than 10,000 people in Army-style barracks behind barbed wire. In the language of Roosevelt's order, the actions were taken to establish every possible protection against espionage and against sabotage to national defense. Approximately two-thirds of those incarcerated without due process were fully enfranchised American citizens by birth. The remainder were lawful permanent residents. President Donald Trump's harsh rhetoric about Muslims, Mexicans, and other immigrants has reignited scrutiny of this dark period in American history. Internment even made headlines in November when Carl Higbee, the former spokesman for the pro-Trump Great America PAC, cited American treatment of Japanese residents in World War II as an example of appropriate action to protect national security. I haven't looked that up to see if that's exactly what he said. I don't trust Mother Jones, and I haven't really looked that up to see if that's exactly what he said. And I'm going to do that. But I just wanted to, he's a former spokesman of a pro-Trump Great America PAC. Okay, so he's a former spokesman. He was part of a PAC, wasn't formally part of the Trump campaign. So perhaps it's no surprise that the 2,500 people who showed up as part of the 48th annual Manzanar pilgrimage on Saturday were a record for the event, according to the Park Service. The blowing dust, the whipping wind, and the beating sun all set an elemental tone for the day's program. Of not so subtle reminder how Manzanar Committee co-chair Bruce Embry later would tell me there was a vicious, just despicable drive to make sure that these camps were sites of suffering, that the people were going to be isolated psychologically and physically far from citizens' populations in desolate areas intended to make people suffer. There was a vicious, just despicable drive to make sure these camps were sites of sufferings. He wanted to make that point again. Though the camp was almost entirely deserted after World War II, concrete slabs and the occasional piece of rusted metal are all that remains of the camp's former living areas. The pilgrims visiting Manzanar walked past full-size reconstructions of the camp's latrines, its mess halls, and its tar paper barracks on the way to the day's ceremony. Wooden Park Service signs marking the location of long-disappeared structures, a recreation hall, an outdoor theater, a pet cemetery, and elementary school dotted the path. Several people in the crowd wore shirts from various California-based Muslim organizations. Among them was Saeed Husani, an organizer with CARE's Los Angeles chapter. Now, if you don't know who CARE is, the Center for American Islamic Relations is an unindicted co-conspirator in a federal investigation. Okay? They don't have, CARE does not have America's best interest at hand or at heart. Okay? Now, Husani explained that for the past few years, CARE LA has participated in the Manzanar pilgrimage in order to keep alive the memory of internment. It is only briefly mentioned, if at all, in most schools in the Muslim community. We have to stand very stand very vigilantly and make sure that we are upholding the tenets of democracy. If good people don't do anything, this is what could happen again, said Husani, who came to Manzanar as one of the three buses CARE LA chartered this year. When the executive order was signed back in the 1940s, only the Quaker community openly voiced dissent, said Husani, echoing a point made a few minutes earlier by one of the event speakers. But we have seen an outpouring of support from many other faith communities and many other civil rights organizations coming out to say that Trump's words are not in keeping with American values and will not stand. Preserving the memory of internment is a guiding mission of those who organize Saturday's pilgrimage, as well as those who work to maintain and expand the facilities at Manzanar National Historic Site. It wasn't until the 1960s that the generation of Japanese Americans born after internment began pushing for recognition and reparations. The Manzanar pilgrimage, for example, began in 1969, kicking off decades of work to establish Manzanar as an officially recognized National Historic Site, which finally happened in 1992. The theme for this year's pilgrimage was never again to anyone, anywhere. Okay? A couple of hours after the ceremony concluded, several hundred people made their way to Lone Pine High School, about 10 miles south of Manzanar, at dusk. In the school gymnasium, the Nikkei student unions at several Los Angeles area colleges put on a 3-hour program that spawned intergenerational conversation about their daytime experiences at the Manzanar pilgrimage. After a spoken word performance that wove through FDR's Executive Order 9066 with Trump's Executive Order 13769, aka the travel ban, the 300 attendees broke into 24 randomly sorted groups for an informal hour-long conversation sprawled out in a high school. If good people do nothing, this could happen again. Now, this is where I wanted to stop the reading here. It goes on just a little bit further. FDR's Executive Order 9066 was for the internment of American citizens and for permanent alien residents that were already vetted and in the United States legally. I would have been against that. I think a lot of people, more people than what they're saying in this article, would have been against that. Now to compare FDR's executive order to Donald Trump's executive order about the travel ban is a gross, ineffectual comparison. Neither one of them can be compared. How can the internment of Japanese Americans, I hate hyphenated Americans things, but this is what we're talking about. How can that be compared with not allowing and vetting and also trying to vet refugees coming to the United States to protect the national security of the United States? That's apples to oranges. What FDR did was tyrannical, imprisoning American citizens just because of their heritage. I make no qualms about that. What Donald Trump did with the travel ban was not internment of American citizens. These folks are not American citizens. They don't have any rights here. They don't have a right to travel to America, especially after seeing what's happening to Europe. And honestly, folks, if Europe falls to Islam, I'm going to be one of the loudest advocates against going over and saving Europe. I really am. If they're that dumb to let these refugees come over there and fundamentally change their culture and their societies, I think America should be done rescuing Europe from war. Let them figure it out themselves. But you cannot compare these two executive orders. It's unfair. It's unintelligible because it doesn't compare. There is no comparison. Trump is not interning these people overseas. He's not interning them here. He wants to vet these people. And if you commit terrorist acts in the United States and you're not an American citizen, and you're a refugee or you're a Muslim immigrant, I don't think you should be allowed to stay in the United States. You should go back to your country of origin. Sorry. Bye-bye. But like I said, again, to compare, and this is what the anti-freedom groups do. They want you to think, they want people to think out there, and most people won't do the research on this. Most people that are anti-freedom out there will not do their research on this and see the difference between FDR's Executive Order 9066 and President Trump's Executive Order 13769. And there's a huge difference. 9066 FDR didn't protect the United States. Matter of fact, if anything, it might have created more hostility towards the United States by doing this. And I believe it did. And we're still suffering from that. So FDR was being a tyrant in this. Donald Trump, in his travel ban, is not being a tyrant. He's protecting the United States against foreign citizens who could come over and do us harm. So I just, I use these as teachable moments. This is one of them that I'm using here. The next one's going to be real quick here. 200 refugees are crossing Mexico to escape violence and to confront Trump. At this moment, this was posted on May 1st, at this moment, a group of 200 refugees fleeing violence and gangs in Central America are heading north through Mexico in hopes of seeking asylum when they reach U.S. border later this week. The caravan, which has been planned with a coalition of Mexican and American organizers, is meant to raise awareness of the perils facing migrants in Mexico, as well as the Trump administration's efforts to prevent refugees from legally entering the United States. We, as a sovereign nation, have a right to know who's coming in our country. I don't care what the libertarians say. I don't care what the anti-freedom and libertarians, I can't call them anti-freedom, although some of the positions they have are definitely anti-freedom. We as a country have a right to know who's coming into our country, period. That's constitutional. I don't care who you are. And for these 200, I'm not going to read down through this article. I wanted to read that first paragraph. You can go, I have the link up in the show notes page later today. The idea that these 200 refugees have the right to come from Central America and cross a border into Mexico and then try to cross the border into the United States. They were illegal in Mexico, which means they're going to be illegal when they get here, and expect to confront or redress grievances they might have with President Donald Trump, which they do not have that constitutionally protected right. They're not American citizens. I'm sorry. That's constitutional, folks. And the fact that there's Mexican and American organizers who want to raise the awareness of perils facing migrants in Mexico, as well as the Trump administration's efforts to prevent refugees from legally entering the United States. Donald Trump is doing what a president's supposed to do. He's supposed to protect us, defend the country from foes, both foreign and domestic. And I wonder if these groups could convince us and guarantee us with 100% surety that nobody of these 200 refugees are going to commit a crime when they get in the United States. And the problem is, if they come here illegally and cross that border, they've already broken federal law. Every illegal immigrant in the country is a criminal because they broke federal law to either get here or come on a visa and overstay their visa and stay here. That's breaking federal immigration law. And they should be dealt with. And this, again, is by Cristobal Sanchez from OtherJones.com, posted on the 1st. And this is what, folks, a lot of people follow these anti-freedom websites like Mother Jones and Salon Slate and Huffington Post. A lot of people follow these, and a lot of people definitely get the wrong idea about things in America. Does it sound good that they're going to confront President Trump about these refugees? Well, if you're not thinking about freedom and Constitution, It might sound good. Now, some people might come back and say, well, what about their freedom? Okay, what about their freedom? Why are they coming north? Why aren't they staying and making where they live a better place? Why aren't they doing that? I'm just asking the questions, folks. Why aren't they doing that? And we're going to get into this article here with Timothy Snyder about this historian here. And one of his articles, one of his chapters in his book talked about you need to be ready to leave the United States. You got to have your passport ready. You need to leave the United States and then possibly work from outside in if the United States falls into a tyranny. And I don't agree with that. Never have. I would stay here and fight for the United States and fight for that idea of freedom and liberty that is enshrined in our Declaration of Independence, that's protected it with our Constitution. And again, this I encourage you. It was like a little over $3 for the ebook. 128 pages. Took me about 2 hours to read it last night. And again, what a bunch of hokum. Now, I'm not saying the history is bad. I'm pretty sure he got the history right. But his application, the lessons we're supposed to learn from history, his applications are totally off the mark. And Chauncey De Vega, again, he has a podcast, and I listened to the one podcast that was about this, and this guy, the first half hour of his podcast was based on erroneous information and erroneous ideas. This Chauncey De Vega, if you go listen to the podcast, he's one of these folks that have bought into the definition of critical thinking theory, that you think you've critically got the conclusion. You thought about it. These are the conclusions that you've come up with. Then you go back and start looking for facts. That's just as bad, folks, as someone going to the Bible with a preconceived notion that faith only. It's only faith that gets you saved, and they ignore all the passages about baptism. Peter talks about it in 1 Peter, all the passages in the book of Acts, all the examples of conversion in the books of Acts, where baptism is definitely part of salvation, especially Acts 2:38, where Peter, with the first gospel sermon, said, repent and be baptized every one of you for the remission of sins, and then you'll receive the gift of the Holy Spirit. And nowhere, I've challenged people that say faith only. Nowhere in the Bible does it talk about faith only. Because if you try to do that, you got to ignore facts that are in evidence in Scripture if it's faith only. And that's exactly what's happened with this Chauncey De Vega and most of the anti-freedom podcasters out there, websites. This one's actually from salon.com. They actually have podcasts on salon.com. And I challenge you. It may only be anecdotal, but go over to Blog Talk Radio, and you can click on the conservative, which I consider myself to be, but just click on the conservative podcast and see how many numbers there are there, and then do the same with the liberal podcast and see who outshines who as far as sheer numbers. And they wouldn't be... These shows wouldn't be on Blog Talk Radio if they weren't being effectual. Honestly, if my numbers weren't where they're at now, and I want to thank everybody for the listenings and downloads and stuff like that every day. I'm hanging up there where I'd really like to be. Where we're talking hundreds of listeners. I'd love to be up to thousands and maybe tens of thousands of listeners a day, but eventually we'll get there. I know I've been doing this, 791 episodes. But I've had some misfires in the past. I took some time off. Now I had to rebuild everything. But it galls me that when I come across somebody like this Chauncey De Vega, that is just, and like I said, I'm not a Trump supporter, but I'm about being fair. And when you run with fake narratives, you can only do that for so long. You can only do that for so long because eventually the truth wins out. Eventually the truth wins out. And he's one of these guys, there's like with Hillary Clinton, it's almost like he's like a Jedi, and this is an homage to tomorrow. May the 4th be with you tomorrow. But he's almost like a Sith Lord. Yeah. Where he's like, mind control. There's nothing to see here. Move along, move along. And when it comes to Hillary Clinton and Bernie Sanders, especially Hillary Clinton, this guy's like, and a lot of them, and they're almost in lockstep with this, folks. Well, that was Hillary Clinton. She's not president. Yeah, but she hasn't answered for a lot of stuff. Barack Obama hasn't answered for a lot of stuff. And these anti-freedom folks will just bash you over the head when you talk about Benghazi. Well, there's nothing to see there. Why are you guys still on Benghazi? Folks, there were 4 Americans, men, who died there for no good reason. It wasn't because of a video, and Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton were asleep at the wheel. There's no other explanation for it. They were asleep at the wheel, and they've yet to answer for those 4 lives. They've yet to answer for them. So when I hear podcasters like this guy, or even some libertarians out there that are historically inaccurate and want to dismiss actual historical facts, like money was lost, we're talking hundreds of millions, if not billions, were misplaced with Hillary Clinton when she was in the State Department. Haitians bringing up charges that the FBI are still looking into with the Clinton Foundation. All right. The email. Everybody's like, well, that's not even the news anymore. Well, you know what? It is. Because Hubadon and Anthony Weiner are still under investigation. And matter of fact, they found emails that they thought were lost with the Clintons on a laptop that Umedin and Anthony shared. They found some more of these emails, and they're still investigating this. Can you imagine investigating like 60,000 lost emails? Oh, Dave puts up here, thanks Dave for putting this up. He says, when I search online Bible for faith only, I get one verse, James 2:24. You see then how that by works a man is justified and not by faith only. And that there is cherry picking out of James. If you try to use that to say it's faith only, talk about works and everything. You show me your faith without your works, and I'll show you my faith by my works. Okay, now, the last thing I want to get into, I only have a few minutes left, is this article from CNS News by Terrence P. Jeffrey. Spending bill funds corporation for public broadcasting through fiscal year 2019 past the 2018 election. So they passed this, then the corporation for public broadcasting will be funded through fiscal year 2019 for the next 2 years. And folks, to me, that is unacceptable. It really is. And here's a real quick, like 2-minute video here from CNS News talking about in this hearing. They're going to talk to the CEO of public broadcasting, and she's going to give her answer why this is a good thing for this forward funding. So this is the video here.
I want to begin, and I want to assure you this is asked in a friendly way, but I think it's an important thing. You have a very unusual funding stream in that you are forward funded by a couple of years, which is very unusual in the budget. So I'm often asked about why this particular agency gets this particular treatment. So I'd like you, if you would, just to address that question, kind of help inform the committee about that.
Yes, and we're very, very appreciative of our forward funding. And there were 2 reasons. The reasoning behind our forward funding was, the first one I think was extreme, both of them. But the first one, really important, and it was to provide a firewall of independence for our content providers, that no matter who was in leadership, no matter what political party, contracts. We have to be able to contracts, and then stations with the confidence that we are going to go ahead, they go out and they are able to raise the money. And those are the two primary reasons.
I think it's very important for people to understand, because I think that frankly, that wall of independence is really critical to your mission and retaining the confidence that you need to retain, frankly, across the political spectrum. So I just wanted to get that on the record.
Just wanted to get that on the record. We have a Republican, Representative Cole, a Republican, that's talking about this. This is good. Folks, I had the idea in my brain that if it's good, if it's beneficial to education or whatever, that these people at the Corporation for Public Broadcasting should be able to stand alone with this, either with corporate donations, which the vast majority of their program is supported by. They get way more money from viewers and from corporate sponsorships than they do the government. And I've said this before, like the Red Green Show. I love the Red Green Show. That would be easily commercialized. This Old House, easily commercialized, to stand alone. There's a lot of other programs on there that I like that would be able to stand alone. The Woodwright, he's very interesting in his old, hand tools and stuff like that. And people have asked me, well, do you support public broadcasting? I said, yeah, every time they take tax dollars, federal tax dollars out of my paycheck, I support the public broadcasting. So, folks, it just amazes me. Again, I want to end the show with this, how the Republicans are acting and they don't know how to govern. They really don't. And I didn't go back and look at this Tom Coles, if he campaigned on this or not, but I know more Republicans than not from watching the campaigns and stuff like that were against continuing funding for the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, for Planned Parenthood. We talked about this yesterday, that Planned Parenthood's still going to get their funding. So if anybody tells me that a Republican out there who votes for this continuing resolution and that has the Planned Parenthood funding still in it is pro-life, I'm going to call you on it. I'm going to flat out call you on it, because it's wrong. They are not pro-life. Sorry. You can't have your cake and eat it too. You can't say that you're going to defund Planned Parenthood and you don't like Planned Parenthood, but when it comes down where the rubber meets the road and you have an opportunity to defund one of the most evil organizations that has ever been concocted by man on earth, and that is the Margaret Sanger-inspired Planned Parenthood, you're just not right in the head. I'm sorry, you're just not right in the head. And your supporters, and I'll call Republican voters out too, if you continue to return these Republicans to Congress, especially in 2018, and they have not done what they're supposed to do or what they've promised they're going to do in their campaigns. And I understand there's a long way to go and it's a hard road to hoe when it comes to keeping your campaign promises, but your votes count. You got to stand up for your principles. And if you're not willing to vote these people out, you're part of the problem too. You're absolutely part of the problem. And you need to look at you need to look in your own heart and figure out what your principles are, and if you're going to actually stand on principles and vote on principles, or are you just going to vote the party line because you're afraid if the Democrats get in there that it's going to be hell on earth. It just, folks, it does. It's ridiculous how people vote and how they actually don't stand on their principles, quite honestly, folks. This has been the Dan Columbus Show. I'm your host, Dan Columbus, your constitutional lawyer. Remember, if you aim at nothing, you hit it every time. Have a great rest of the day. God bless. We'll see you tomorrow at noon. And may the 4th be with you tomorrow.
for using Blog Talk Radio. Goodbye.